In the 16th century, headwear mattered. Not only was headwear practical and sheltered the wearer from the elements such as the sun, rain, or wind, but these garments also participated in a complex social system of etiquette that defined displays of status, power, and masculinity. The most common style of hat worn by men during the first half of the 16th century was referred to in multiple languages as a bonnet. Bonnets were generally characterised by a large continuous brim that folded up, and for elite men they were commonly made of dark silk velvet. Caps, on the other hand, referred to softer, less structured headwear made from knitted wool or silk, with a small brim or no brim at all. One of the most common types of caps was a flat cap, that has a flat crown combined with a very narrow flat brim. Renaissance understandings of the head mirrored those of antiquity, where the classical body emphasized the head as the seat of reason, and during the Renaissance, amateur political theorists made much of the fact that the head governed the body. Husbands were also portrayed through bodily analogies, such as the head of his wife's body. This is because, in the incredibly patriarchal society of the time, the male body was believed to be the more perfect body, and so was believed to be endowed with greater reason and therefore more adept at leadership. So in these contexts, the head was synonymous with leadership and power, particularly male power. Headwear was therefore a very important part of male dress, as it helped to focus these ideas of social and political power. As extensions of the body, and particularly of the head, these garments were jammed with overlapping meanings relating to authority, rationality, and even charismatic spiritual power. Nowhere was this more obvious than through the use of crowns that signified a monarch's authority as the head of state, or through the use of religious headwear, such as the beret of the Venetian Doge, which concentrated the essence of both their institutional authority and their charismatic holiness. Consequently, headwear, from crowns to religious berets and even military helmets, usually signified male power and authority in a wide range of situations during the 16th century. And communities that could read and interpret these visual signs were constructed. Everyday items such as hats were highly visible, effective, and personal means of communication before the mid-20th century. In 16th century Europe, a very structured system of etiquette and courtesy had begun to emerge. Importantly, men's headwear, unlike women's, which was generally immobile in the form of hoods and elaborate headdresses, lent itself to expressions through movement. So aggression, defiance, salutation, respect, submission, and emotion were readily conveyed through gestures such as adorning, touching, taking off, or carrying a hat. Refusing to take off headwear could send a very clear signal, such as resisting authority, giving even a powerless individual some scope for bold personal expression. Not taking off one's hat to a figure of authority was such a grave offence that men who could not show their heads applied for licenses to exempt them from these social conventions. In May 1523, John Conway of Flintshire in England was granted a licence to wear his bonnet at all times and in all places on account of disease on the head. Thus, what men did or did not do with their headwear in social situations mattered in the 16th century. It is therefore unsurprising that ambassador accounts from the period consistently noted down in correspondence what men were doing with their headwear in various diplomatic situations. While sumptuous fabrics and jewels used to make headwear of male elites proclaimed their social status, the doffing of headwear to one's superior, whether that be a son to a father, a young man to an elder, or a subject to a king, also demonstrate a status and acknowledge deference. Diplomatic situations called for specific types of male hat etiquette. Ambassadors did not have to bare their heads in front of foreign monarchs, as they symbolically represented their king. This was demonstrated in 1536 when the imperial ambassador Eustace Chapuis wrote to the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V to report on his time in England. He reported that Tuesday after Easter he had been invited to meet Henry VIII at Greenwich Palace, where, quote, "the king came out and gave me a very kind reception, holding for some time his bonnet in his hand, and not allowing me to be uncovered longer than himself. And after asking how I was, and telling me that I was very welcome, he inquired of the good health of your majesty, and showed himself very glad to hear good news." In this scene, Henry's insistence that Chapuis not be uncovered any longer than himself was a sign of esteem for Charles V, as he treated Chapuis as he would have done the emperor. Later in 1539, the English ambassadors reported back to Henry VIII on when they had met Mary of Hungary to discuss the matter of Henry's possible marriage to her niece, Christina of Denmark. In their correspondence, they wrote that they, quote, were yesterday towards the night sent to speak with the Queen, where they found her in her council chamber with her chief secretaries. There she, quote, made us sit down and put on our caps and addressed us. So the gender dynamics in this scene are particularly telling of the power plays that could take place during the observance of male headwear etiquette. The English ambassadors had removed their caps, as was the custom when meeting women. However, as Mary was both a queen and governor of the Low Countries, acting on behalf of her brother, the Holy Roman Emperor, custom dictated that they did not need to remove their hats. Mary's insistence that they put their caps back on sent a clear message. The Queen viewed Henry VIII as her equal, and so his ambassadors should remain covered after their initial gesture of respect, as they would have done so if she were the emperor. If remaining uncovered was a sign of deference to a superior, taking a hat on and off was a gesture of respect. At the Field of Cloth of Gold in 1520, it was reported that the English King Henry VIII and the French King Francis I, quote, embraced each other 2 or 3 times on horseback, bonnet in hand, then dismounting, embraced again. The Field of Cloth of Gold was a nearly 3-week-long summit between English King Henry VIII and French King Francis I, held at Calais, designed to improve relations between these two great rival kingdoms. It was a magnificent spectacle, full of lush displays of festivities, wealth, and power that later became known as the Field of Cloth of Gold. French accounts of this event were also observant of what each monarch did with his hat, as they noted that they embraced, bonnets in hand, and made grand gestures of love. Similar scenes were also common for the Holy Roman Emperor and his diplomatic affairs. When Charles V met his brother-in-law Francis I in 1539, quote, the emperor doffed his hat and the king his cap, and they embraced 3 or 4 times and went forward to the stair of the lodging. On these occasions, the removal of a bonnet not only indicated respect for one another, but also for the status of each monarch. They were equals, both Renaissance princes. Thus, it was important that they both took off their hats and placed them back on their heads at the same time. The customs dictating the use of 16th-century male headwear therefore gave men a conspicuous, non-verbal, everyday language that could convey emotion, intent, respect, and reverence. If you enjoyed hearing more about Renaissance men's dress and Renaissance dress in general, please like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video.